There is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine.
Enjoying great food in a bustling public square is a sensory delight. The atmosphere is alive with conversations, laughter, street performers, enhancing the experience of savoring a delicious meal. Aromas of freshly prepared dishes blend with the scent of blooming flowers and cobblestone pathways, making each bite of your meal, whether a crispy baguette sandwich or a rich pasta dish, more intense and satisfying. But then there's also the communal aspects to dining. Strangers share tables, exchange local delicacy recommendations, and engage in light-hearted banter. Families come together and laugh. Couples fall in love. Friends catch up on life. The vibrant backdrop that a meal brings is unique. The combination of food and a dynamic environment creates lasting and cherished memories. And what better setting is there to share the gospel and grow in discipleship than a table rich with food and fellowship? Friends, that is what we're here to talk about today with my friend, Mark Grapengater. Mark, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Case.
So Mark and I met a few years back when I was moderator of the EPC and he was a church planter. And then we ran into each other recently at our General Assembly. And I thought, man, I want others to hear about Mark and his great work. So, Mark, what did you eat today for lunch?
Actually, we had Stacy, my wife's aunts were over, and so I cooked for them Sunday night. So I had some leftovers that I threw in a pita, some homemade hummus. It was kind of a meatball in the Mediterranean style, some yogurt sauce, some spice, some really nice spicy peppers, chilies, and some fresh peaches. Because after living in Georgia and having peaches all summer long, even in Colorado, we get them delivered all summer long. So we got Georgia peaches. So yeah.
Well, I am a big hummus fan for sure.
It's great.
Friends, whether you're viewers or listening, welcome to Nuance, where we seek to be faithful in the public square. I'm Case Thorpe and want to encourage you, like, subscribe, and share. It really does help us to grow our little effort here and to reach even more. Well, let me tell you a bit about Mark. So he grew up in Oklahoma and on a mission trip to Costa Rica felt a divine calling to pastoral ministry. Now with degrees from Kansas State University, North Park Theological Seminary in Chicago, Mark has served a number of churches in Tulsa, Chicago, St. Louis, and Atlanta before now here in Denver to grow a new expression of church. Recently, he completed a Doctor of Ministry focused on hospitality and the pastoral vocation through, and dude, I think this is so cool, the Eugene Peterson Center for Christian Imagination at Western Theological Seminary. Man, that's cool.
It was a blast. It was such a great experience.
Well, and I know a lot of our listeners will be familiar with Eugene Peterson and Christian imagination. Okay, we got to talk about more about that. So Mark and his wife, Stacy, have been married since 2011. They have 3 children, Michael, Evelyn, and Joshua. So he is a non-traditional pastor, if you will. He uses the term pastor for the neighborhood at what he calls the table there in Denver. And I love, Mark, what you have on your website about the table. We exist to provide a place at the table of God's grace. That just kind of gets my heart because I think of how many people don't know about God's grace and don't know there's a seat waiting for them. Well, Mark has worked in restaurants in Vail, a Michelin-rated restaurant in Chicago and St. Louis. He's also, and this is what we're going to focus on today, the founder of the Host Collective. It's part cookbook, part supper club, part storytelling. Host Collective aims to bring people around the table as amateur cooks, Presbyterian ministers. So what, you're saying I can come? Former hospitality industry workers. He writes, we bring a sacramental imagination to the world of food and hospitality. Dude, So cool. What did I miss about your bio that you'd like others to know?
I think you did a pretty good job, Case. I think you summed it up quicker than I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife and I both worked in the restaurant industry in the
Mm.
hospitality. And
Is
what
that how
God
you
was
met?
gracious enough to do, no, we met through a mutual friend, and she had been at the church that I was at in Chicago. And then when I moved to St. Louis, she connected Stacy and me, and we began eating our way through St. Louis and not really thinking we were dating, which was probably a really good thing
Hmm.
at the
Hmm.
time. And then just going like, just falling in love over the shared table with one another.
Hmm.
And it was really a gracious thing. And so she had always worked front of the house, and I had traditionally always worked back of the house. And
Okay.
so now when we host people in our home or when we do events, we just kind of can seamlessly see what's needed, and we kind of know
Hmm.
kind
Hmm.
of what we need to do to be able to extend the hospitality that's been extended to us.
Well, then we've got a lot in common. My wife, her gift of
Hmm.
hospitality is just outstanding. She not
Yeah,
only is a foodie herself, but a gourmet cook.
there you go.
She grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And let me tell you, dude, she can cook up a storm. And, at night at my house, we don't just grab a peanut butter and jelly or cook breakfast for dinner. And I'll say, Jody, it's okay. We don't have to go fancy. No, no, no. I love it. I love it. And she makes
Yeah,
these
yeah,
unbelievable things with all kinds of ingredients.
that's great. Yeah, our kids are younger, so we do a lot of breakfast for dinner still. Or spaghetti and meatballs. We try to make it nice. We make our homemade meatballs, but
Yeah.
we're
Well,
not,
we
depending
won't.
on just
We've
depending
got
on
a
who we're
rule.
having over. So sorry.
Our rule with little ones is paper plates for breakfast and lunch, but never for dinner.
Oh,
We
never
use
for dinner.
the
No,
real dinner plates. And,
that's nice.
hosting hospitality is one of our greatest
Hmm.
things we do together. It's just so much fun to get the house ready and think ahead and then provide a great experience for people.
It is, and it's no easy task either. So
Hmm.
good on
Hmm.
you guys for doing that.
Well, tell me about your culinary journey, both
Hmm.
personally but also professionally.
I usually start by saying that there were a few English speaking channels that we had in Costa Rica when I studied abroad there. And one of them was the Food Network. And for missing tastes of home and filling otherwise my brain with non-Spanish speaking words, I watched a lot of Food Network. And so I learned by osmosis quite a bit. And I didn't have like a kitchen at my disposal either. So when I
Yeah.
got back to the US, I realized that I had to cook for myself and feed myself. And in seminary, living in Chicago, which has some of the best restaurants in the world, I would argue, more than other well known cities as well. But some of the best restaurants in the world, I couldn't eat at them because I didn't have funds for it. But I knew
Mm.
I had some access to the food that they were using, or more, a greater diversity of food. The neighborhood where the seminary was spoke like 120 languages or something like that. It was wild. So
Wow.
I had exposure to all these sort of things. So I could go and try stuff at, neighborhood restaurants. I could go buy and cook. And I lived in an apartment, so I had to feed myself. And that was really the only hobby that I could afford to do because I needed to eat. And so I'd invite people over, other seminary students, and we'd have a good meal together. I'd put some wine with it. The church that I was involved in, Grace Chicago, would hold a wine tasting event every fall. And it was it
Mm.
was very much like an event to invite people into.
Yeah.
But it was also like we curated really good food, and we had some great wine. I mean, we would taste over 100 wines to put about 12 or 15 out
Mm.
for people.
Mm.
And then I was able, through one of the friends that helped with the wine tasting event, he was eating at this restaurant that was kind of a smaller, more creative driven, but tasting menu restaurant called Bon Soiree, and Shin Thompson was a chef there, and he just invited me in. He needed a chef, pantry chef, which is kind of prep and kind of auxiliary to service and everything. We had a kitchen that was maybe the size of my home kitchen now. It was a very, very small kitchen. It's about 22 seats, and we would come in and we would do 4, 8, or 13 courses. And that was your only decision. And it was BYO, which a lot of restaurants in Chicago are. So you could bring in your own drinks. And Kevin, the first time we ate there, we had the 13-course menu, and he brought in a case of wine, and we never saw a menu. Graciously, I never saw a bill either. And when I started cooking there, I just learned a ton of how to prep food, how to think through a menu, how to prepare for people coming in. And that set me off on a journey in hospitality.
Let me pause your journey though. Explain this to me, because I love eating great food, but I always feel bad for the chefs. And I figure, you've just got to love it to have the horrible hours, to be in a hot environment, the stress and the pace. You just got to love it, right?
You have to. And, like every job, there are aspects that are not lovable. But what you're able to do to be able to show people, because it goes way beyond the food, right? Like when you go into a nice restaurant, maybe you've heard about what they're putting out, but the service aspect of it, what your experience is there, the warmth, the hospitality, the welcome, being taken care of, not having attitudes from servers, things being done well and paced well, all of that plays into it. So I think there are probably some chefs that are doing it because this is the way they need to get by. And kitchens can sometimes be kind of culinary pirate ships. But you also learn a skill, you learn some gifting, you learn a lot about yourself.
What do you mean by culinary pirate ships? Stealing other ideas or?
No. So it's very open source. So you can always borrow from someone. You're never the full originator of an idea. You often riff off of it when it comes to putting stuff together. But like a pirate ship is like, so I went into my restaurant, or the restaurant that I worked at in Chicago. Shin was classically trained, went to culinary school. His chef de cuisine was more classically trained, but also not on the business side of things. He was a great dude. I really loved working with him, but that wasn't his kind of forte. Steve, the other guy that was working alongside me, had kind of bounced around and had, some storied history. And I'm coming out of seminary, from a very different place in my life. And so you just have all sorts of people coming together into a kitchen and putting out this amazing experience for people, giving up the sacrifice that goes into kind of the feast that's set before you is really, really amazing.
So by pirate ship, you mean all these gifts coming together for this moment? People
coming together from all over, putting in their little bits and pieces of it to make a meal, their giftings, but it really welcomes people in a way that few other places do. Your background doesn't matter as much.
So July 4th, all of my family was here and there except for me and my daughter. And I thought, well, let's go do something special. So we went to the Four Seasons at Walt Disney World. And on the very top is a fancy restaurant called Kappa. And normally, such a place would be a pretty penny. And I thought, you know what, let's just go for dessert and watch the Magic Kingdom fireworks, which for the 4th of July will be even more amazing. And save a penny. So we did. And we ended up with a few appetizers. Well, the sommelier was amazing. And God bless him, I think he was bored to tears. And so I looked at the wine list just a little longer than normal for a simple glass. And he came rushing over. Yes, may I help you? Well, I'd read about Sherry's in the Wall Street Journal, and I said, tell me about Sherry. Well, he went and got samples, and it was a wonderful time. And I was
Oh
so
yeah.
very grateful. But I thought, man, I don't think he's getting utilized enough. But I came away with a new Sherry friend. So,
Well, that's what's wonderful is that you have this ability, and really good restaurants are really good at this. No matter, and I don't mean that by like a fine dining standard or a Michelin star, but a restaurant
mhm.
that wants to give you an experience that you're going to walk away
Yeah,
from. You're going to learn something about
that's right.
sherry's, for example. I have had a similar experience. You're going to learn something different about food. And you're going to go, oh, I like this one. I don't like this one so much. And then you'll be more informed when you walk into, your local liquor store and being able to buy something or pairing that drink with a food or hosting other people, and you can tell that story. And
Yeah.
those are some of the most beautiful experiences. And it
So,
doesn't take that much more for them to do that.
really, well, and he gave me so much sample of different Sherry's. I'm like, dude, you're going to charge me for this?
Yeah.
Have you seen the TV series Drops of God on Apple Plus?
I have not. No.
Drops of God. All right, everybody, you've got to go watch this. And if Apple wants to send me some sponsorship dollars, they're welcome to. But Drops of God is a series where the a worldwide vintner sommelier who does all the judging for the big fancy wine magazine, I forget, Wine Spectator, he has just died. And so his protege and his daughter that he has not fathered and spoken to in years are in a competition in his will for his wine collection. And they not only is the competition really good, the drama is really good. It's a drama, but you learn all kinds of things about wine and tasting. And I think of course, they purposefully did it for those that have interest in that, plus the good drama. But everybody needs to go watch it. Drops of God. Okay, let's get back to your culinary journey. Now, in Chicago, you were at a Michelin-rated restaurant. And
Yeah.
I know Michelin as a rating, but is it in any way related to the Michelin Man?
Oh, yeah. That's how it began. It
Okay, because I
began
thought,
in,
how do
yeah.
you connect tires to fine dining?
Well, through driving. So Michelin company started in France, and they
Okay,
wanted people to use their tires, like
Michelin,
use the tires on their car, and
right?
so that they would go and visit restaurants. So they began by rating them 1, 2, and 3 stars. One
Okay,
star is if you're in the area, you should eat there. A 2 star is if you are nearby, you should stop there, like take a detour. And a three
okay.
star is plan a whole trip around this restaurant. And
So it doesn't
so
necessarily mean better, best, and or good, better,
well,
best,
it does.
but it does
But
incorporate proximity.
yeah, that's the traditional rating. And so it's a little different now, but
Okay.
your 3 star restaurant, you should have a really outstanding, lifetime memorable experience. And a
Mm-hmm,
one
mm-hmm.
star should still be a very good experience for you.
Did they do this
Yeah,
for more than just restaurants, or it was solely that?
I I believe they're only restaurant
I didn't know
ratings.
if they
I
might
could be
want
wrong
you to
about
use
that.
your tires to go to a national park or theme
Not
park. Yeah.
currently. I haven't seen any Michelin
Yeah.
stars for national
Well,
parks.
and I'm talking about originally, back in the day.
Yeah, not
Back in
that
the
I
day.
know of. Not that I know
Okay,
of.
so do I take it though they've added then beyond the three?
So they have added like some Bib Gourmand, and some notable kind of stars, or like some not stars but ratings. So they still have their 1, 2, and 3 stars, but
Okay.
they have some like Denver was recently, or Colorado, I guess, was recently given Michelin some Michelin status. Our highest star rating is a 1, and I think I've
Oh,
eaten at all of them here.
so there's no
Um,
threes in Colorado.
there's no 2s in Colorado.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
you have to be pretty, like your 3 star restaurant is like the French Laundry in Yountville, Alinea in Chicago,
Okay.
um, uh, 1111 Madison Park in New York. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Now,
those
this
are
place,
pretty outstanding.
how many stars at the restaurant where you were in Chicago?
We had 1 star.
Okay. But still, that's a big deal.
It's a big deal. So, yeah.
Okay. So then your culinary journey.
So when I left, so I worked in the restaurant while I was looking for a ministry job, a pastoral position, and I always felt the call to church planting. Not always, but that was a kind of the direction I thought God was calling me. And so ended up getting connected to a church in St. Louis that was being planted in the city. And the restaurant that I worked at connected me to a chef in St. Louis. And so I staged there, spent about a week. A stage is kind of it can be a number of things. It can be a job interview. It can be a learning opportunity. It can be kind of like go and learn what the chef is doing. And then you can take that back, kind of an internship, if you will. And so I did that at, now I can't remember the name of it, which is terrible. Niche was the restaurant there, one of the first fine dining restaurants in St. Louis. I ended up.
Let me just throw in, people may not know, but a lot of times church planners are bivocational, meaning they're hustling in order to be supported and to be able to have the time to do the church plant. So that's not abnormal.
Yeah. And I was an intern. And so church plants are notorious for not being able to pay interns for a lot of reasons. So,
and sometimes they're pastors. That's another episode.
That might be a different podcast, but so I ended up working, because fine dining hours, like you said, they're just intense. It would have taken my full weekend. They're typically, you're working 12 plus hour shifts. Throw into that, I had a pretty young dog. So I just knew that wasn't gonna work out, and I didn't move there to work in the restaurant industry, but it was what I needed to do. But St. Louis was such a small enough community in the restaurant world, especially, that I was able to get in. I worked at there's a restaurateur there, Dave Bailey, who has a family of restaurants, and so I ended up working in all 3 of the restaurants that he had at the time. And ran the kitchen in 2 of them. He has a chocolate bar, kind of a dessert bar in Lafayette Square where the church was located. And then he had a tap room and wine kind of tasting room kind of thing, kind of elevated bar food stuff. So, yeah.
Okay. So you've just grown so much. You've been in a number of different environments, from Michelin-rated to, like you say, pop-ups. Tell us about the Host Collective and how it came about.
So the Host Collective, one of my good friends that I met in St. Louis is Joshua Burdett, and we've kind of staggered our journeys. So the only time we ever lived together or in the same place was St. Louis, and we quickly bonded over food and cooking. And he's a Presbyterian minister as well, and we've been talking for years about how we could have kind of our own, instead of just like our mom and our wives liking our Instagram posts about food, maybe we could do something a little bit more than that. And both of us, having worked in the hospitality industry, thought, what is it? We incorporated that into our pastoral ministry. And so he has hosted like pizza nights for his small groups that he was, facilitating in his pastoral ministry. And so he built his own pizza oven. And and I've been
you don't mean like Papa John's?
Not Papa John's, no. So he's like making his own dough and he's cooking them in a wood-fired oven and everything. And then he lived in Santa Barbara for a while. And so food culture out there is pretty strong. And we said, how could we kind of have some outlet for us? And really, as we call it an invitation to keep a feast, to keep the feast. And if we see God as host throughout Scripture in our lives, what would it look like for us to be able to kind of stir people's imaginations, to inspire them to be hosts as well? So I think one of the recent articles he put up was on, cooking for his family and what that looks like. So it's not necessarily big, blown out meals and things that we do all the time, but it's really about getting people to cook, getting people to gather people around a table, their own table, and being a host and being a good guest in their lives.
God as host. That's really cool. And it's so true. And I see this sometimes in my own family. We're pretty good about having sit down dinner together as a family most nights of the week, but you get crunched and you run through Publix or you run through Chick-fil-A, and sadly that becomes such the norm. And statistics show children that grow up in a home in which they regularly sit for meals with their family, their rate of bad behaviors just plummets.
I hope that's true. Yeah, that it's like a marker for us to when we sit down for dinner. And if we've been traveling, if sports have been a bit more than what they should be, interrupting our dinner schedule, like we feel unsettled as a family. At least my wife and I do. My kids probably love it because, still with young kids at a dinner table, it's not the easiest thing. Everybody wants something different. They're getting up because it's the first time they've stopped through the day. So they have to go to the bathroom in the middle. You're like, what, can we just sit down and eat this meal? But they need more cheese or something. Yeah, they're learning.
You form them well. Yeah, we've always had the rule, you eat what we eat. And Jody's smart to make things that she knows they'll like. But we had a dear, dear friend who every single night would make 2 dinners. Yeah. And it was mostly chicken fingers and for the kids. Yeah. And so now my kids can eat all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we don't cook. We will like deconstruct it and not in a fancy way. But if we have my wife makes a really wonderful Thai curry soup, and we'll have the rice on the side. We'll pull chicken out of it and maybe a few other vegetables. But for the most part, the kids pretty much eat the same thing that we eat.
So you had this common vision for Host Collective. Tell us, what are the components and what do you do?
Well, right now we do a lot of writing. We would love to have contributors for that. We've pinged some people, and we would love to have people write stories of how they have hosted people or what meals they have done. We've talked about doing a podcast. We talk about doing quite a few things. One of the big things we did this last year was we would call our patron saint of Host Collective would be Robert Farrar Capon. And so no one has kind of inaugurated a feast for that. And since we're Protestants, we don't have to hold to the same, 2 miracles and all of that. So we reached out to Robert's widow and spoke with her about it, and she was very receptive to it. She was very excited about it even. And so we put together a guide to go, hey, here's some reading, some things that Robert has written, some things that may inspire you. So Robert Capon was a Episcopal priest. He worked at Mercer Theological Seminary, I believe, if that's correct, through the 60s and 70s. His most famed book is called The Supper of the Lamb, in which is kind of a culinary theological reflection. And he said, here's a meal for lamb, but I really want to get you thinking about the food that you're putting on the table and what it means to host people, again, as God has hosted us. And if this is a foretaste for what's about to come, what's the future? I was actually just on a Disney cruise, mentioning Disney earlier, and read his Party Spirit book. And he said, one of the opening sentences is that hosting a party is an act of faith and of hope and love also. Of faith that people are going to show up, of what you're going to do is worthwhile doing, but also that this is leading us somewhere to the New Jerusalem, to the feast that God is going to be throwing for us as well. And so he's just inspired and lit our own imaginations, and we would love to other people be inspired by him as well.
Well, I want folks to go to your website, hostcollective.com, nuance.org. We'll put that
Yep.
in our show notes. And under journal, you've got some great articles there and some great pictures, even one here of you roasting a pig.
Yes.
Which was very fun to read about. Then under bookshelf, there's all kinds of these different books that you suggest and that Robert Capone's is there. Is there a certain date that you've picked for the feast of Robert?
So I believe we picked his birthday, and we had it up. Let me see if yeah. So I'm scrolling through the website as well. I believe it was October 26th is his birthday. And so we had a guide previously. We'll write a new guide for this next year as well. So yes, his birthday.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to the communal beauty of a gathered meal. You wrote going whole hog. And this is your reflection on cooking the hog. Now, I married a Louisiana girl. That's called a cochon de lait.
Yes.
Cochon de lait. But I think it's underground, right?
It can be. Depends on, Bourdain did it, and it was all above ground. They did a little different. So
Got it. I just don't like him.
Yeah.
I just not a fan. But he's gone, right? I'm sorry, he's gone. But
he has passed away.
I just never could get into it. Anyway, I like you. You write, going whole hog by definition is a communal event. It is not a weeknight dinner for two. It is much more than a family meal. It longs to bring scores of people together to rejoice in the bounty God has provided through such an impressive beast. It is an event in and of itself. People's eyes and ears perk up. Their faces question the whole affair in disbelief. Usually, the follow-up question is, how? The short answer is patience and fire. The long answer is an invitation to come and join in the feast. What is it about food that just brings people together?
Everybody has to eat. Everybody has to eat, no matter what kind of diet we may be trying to hold on to for whatever reason. But God has put in innately in us, and we've put it 3 times a day, the need sustenance, to have hunger, to have thirst, and to be able to share that, to do that around table with one another is, I think, one of the most miracle giving things that we have, this side of heaven, especially. I could go. I can keep going, but yeah.
Well, and I see how food is both an affirmation of who we are as people, our culture, our likes, our dislikes, our shared appreciations for a particular dish. But then when you engage another culture and food style, it creates wonder and question. So I'm out of the box, love to try different stuff. My wife, who's an amazing cook, is very much in the box. She wants to go to a place she knows is going to be great. And I'm a little more risky. Well, I've been wanting to get them to an Indian restaurant, and there hasn't been much excitement in our family to visit. But it was my birthday, by golly, and I get to pick, and I said, that's where we're going. Well, they loved it. They just woofed it up and came home, and all they've been talking about is, when are we going back? And so I just, as a dad, rejoiced in us getting to appreciate the fullness of humanity and who all God's created us to be.
I mean, God has given so many different cultures their own food style, and how they have taken their local ingredients and their place and space, their geography, and how that has worked to create a very specific culture. So Indian food is because of the rich spice history that they have, as well as the heat and the humidity. And so you're going to have this extra, mouth spiciness to it that makes you sweat, and that actually cools your body down as well. So you see, more equator-centric culinary cultures have a bit more spice to them. Midwest isn't as hot. And so, the black pepper that my dad grew up on in Kansas is the heat level that he's able to
Right.
manage.
Right.
So it just depends on where you're at and how God has pulled things together.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and I think like the globalness that we have now in seeing how people are pulling together, kind of more like Shin, the chef that I worked for in Chicago. He grew up in Hawaii. He was Japanese American, and he took many of those ingredients and used them with his French culinary training that he had, much more traditional. He would never call it fusion.
Japanese
So
or Hawaiian ingredients?
he leaned more towards Japanese stuff.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's because that's his cultural heritage. And so we would use what do we use? Togarashi was a spice blend from Japan that we would use. That's not necessarily hot because they don't have spicy food there, but it definitely added more to a dish than what your typical,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, you know, ice cream or whatever. I'm trying to remember what we used it in.
Hmm.
But different spices and a different approach to, rice than what it would be otherwise. So,
Now, a moment ago, you
mhm.
warned he wouldn't use the word fusion. What's wrong with using
Yeah.
the word fusion?
It's just kind of, it's, I think
Overused?
maybe it was overused. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And sometimes sometimes you're not fusing two things together, but the technique that you've learned, you're incorporating something that's more outside the box to
Mhm.
lift it up to something a little bit
Got
different,
it.
if that makes
Got it.
sense. So,
Well,
yeah,
more of a intentional integration because you understand the fundamentals
it's a
of what
great
you're
way to
bringing
say that.
together. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So back on your book page, I love
Hmm.
that you have Christine Pohl's book here,
Oh man. Yeah.
Making Room, Recovering
Hmm.
Hospitality as a Christian Tradition by Christine Pohl. We'll put that in the show notes. Her work was very, very important for me when I did my doctorate.
Hmm.
And I had never come across the way in which historically the church has, ministered and evangelized so deeply
Hmm.
through the ministry of hospitality. And it's from that word that we get hospitals and
Hmm.
hostels,
Hmm.
um, these environments in which the Christian community, especially in the Middle Ages, where you didn't have safe roads and
Yep.
establishments, that you knew you could find safety and care and sustenance.
Yeah.
She writes a great book.
Yes. Yeah, that was one of the foundational books for me in my doctorate work as well, because she
Hmm.
lays it out. It's very accessible, and the way she walks through the history of what the church has been known for
Hmm. Hmm.
historically, the way hospitality moved into the institution and then moved back into the homes,
Hmm.
and what does it mean for us? How can we incorporate hospitality into what we do now? Has been
Yeah,
hugely. It kind of helped put words and clothing on the things that I
yeah, yeah.
have been thinking about. Yeah.
Well, parishioners will say, "Oh, I don't know how to evangelize. I don't know
Hmm.
apologetics." You know what? Just have them for dinner. Was
Having
it
for dinner.
Rosaria Butterfield that says
Hmm.
evangelism comes with a front door key? Is that what she says?
Yes, that's her book. Yeah. Yeah. Something
Oh,
like
that's the name of
the
the book.
gospel. The gospel comes with a door key,
Yeah,
house
with the
key,
door
or
key.
something like that. Yeah. Russ Whitfield, who's a pastor in DC, is a pastor in DC. We were having dinner with him, and he said, I believe that and the invitation of people to my dinner table is the first step in them on their way to the Lord's table.
Yeah.
And that was just like, yes, again, this is what I'm trying I grab onto other people who have said things much
Oh
more
yeah.
profoundly than what I
Well,
have. And so
that's why you're a pastor like
it's,
me.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
if we can, like, that's what we do in our neighborhood. We invite people over, we have them over for meals on a regular basis so that we can get to know their stories and that they can get to know ours. And that immediately for us means they get to know Jesus because of us, and we get to share our lives with them. And it's such an easy, you're not going to, I was in Navigators in college, and it was always learn this diagram or that diagram. They're very helpful tools for evangelism.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they just said, "Hey, just get coffee and go out to dinner with people, eat with people in the dorm. Spend your time eating with others. Don't eat alone." That would have been a much more key thing for me. Yeah.
Now, you quote a great deal from Wendell Berry, and I am not a Wendell Berry fan, and that's sort of anathema. I mean, that's anathema in this whole faith and work culture of renewal environment, because he's supposed to be right up there with C.S. Lewis and Tim Keller. And I've tried to get into his books, but like, what's wrong with me, Mark Grapengater, that I can't get into Wendell Berry?
Okay, I don't even know. I don't even know how to start. He had a book. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it's like
tell us who he is.
So Wendell Berry is a farmer, thinker, a writer, a poet. He's been a professor as well, I believe, at University of Kentucky. And the way he thinks about vocation and husbandry of the earth, he's very much against industrial things. And so he's very much like hands in the dirt kind of guy. He is very Luddite, disdaining most technology, runs at a very different pace than the rest of us. Yeah. He would probably never do a podcast or a video. I don't even know. He may have owned a computer, but send him a letter, I think.
I keep asking him to be my friend on Facebook, and he doesn't accept. Yeah. It's just very...
Yeah. Somebody probably started it for him, but the way...
No, I'm kidding.
I'm just kidding. So he just has a way of thinking through like the materiality of things, I think, which is very invitational for me. The challenge of slowing down. My dream job would be like an F1 racer. So very high paced, very fast paced, kind of stuff. But his invitation to slow down, to ponder the things of what God is doing in our lives at a much more living pace, I think is why I've gravitated to him so much. And then as a farmer, he writes a lot about the food production, caring for the land, how we're going to get, healthy food for ourselves, and being involved in that process has been one of the bigger invitations into my exploration of his work.
Well, I certainly take all the blame. I need to mature more in order to fully appreciate him. Mark, in closing here, tell me about a meal or a dish you'd like to one day make that you've not gotten to yet.
That's a really good question. Well, I'll tell you one that I'm working on. And so, larger story, we began to throw parties to gather people, to get to know people in our neighborhood. And as we did that, the auction committee of our kids' elementary school said, "Hey, would you throw a party for our school to raise money?" And we said, "Sure." So this is kind of blown up. This will be the fourth dinner that we have for it. And so the theme originally had kind of been a bacchanalia of a pig roast and open bar. And I said, I've done that. I love doing it, but I'd like to do something that kind of employs some of the fine dining stuff that I've done. So we decided to do a course dinner. We do 7 or 8 courses with wine pairings. And this is the party. I think we raised over $8,500 for the school or so this year.
Wow.
So we have like 50 people coming over end of September for this. And it takes me about a week to prep. Yeah, all at our house. And God has graciously given us space to be able to do this.
And do you foot the bill for all the food?
We have a co-host. So between our family and their family, we split the cost of it.
Okay.
And usually Denver, just sourcing food in Denver is one of the more challenging things.
Uh,
So I did everything but the oink. So I cooked through the pig, from the pig head to the pig tail, composed dishes. We did all chicken theme. I did an all Colorado theme. So all the product was close to like probably 95% of the product, except for like baking soda, salt, and sugar,
uh,
were all from within the state of Colorado.
did you put weed in it?
No, because most of that's outsourced. No, we just, that's another podcast
That's
conversation,
another
but no, we
podcast.
didn't do that. Yeah.
Dude, there's a green cross
So
on
yeah,
every corner, but I
every
digress.
corner.
Every
Yes,
corner.
absolutely. And some neighborhoods just smell like weed because of
God.
all the grow facilities. Anyway, so this year we're going to do Southern food. And
Ooh,
so I'm thinking through a cold shrimp and grits where
ah,
we take the
yes.
grits, when you cook grits and you let them sit for longer than about 4 minutes, they kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
gelatinize together.
My
So
wife
the
made it the other
thought,
night.
yeah, love grits. One of like my Wisconsin wife, when we were in Atlanta, fell in love with grits, fell in love with collards. I mean,
Yeah. Oh,
all
yeah.
this great Southern food.
Well,
So
look,
one
tell
of the
her when y'all
dishes,
are, tell
yeah,
her to come down and see us in Orlando and I'll
okay.
take her grit picking.
Oh, that would be. I
Yeah.
want to go. Can I come too? So
Sure. Oh, it's a lot
that
of
would be
fun. It's
amazing.
fun.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I want to take the grits, cook them, spread them very thin on like a baking sheet, and let them cool, and then cut them into kind of like egg roll wrappers. And
Uh,
so make your shrimp kind of gumbo-y kind of sauce thing, cool that down as well.
okay.
And then take the grit and roll it around that. So it'd almost be like
Mm,
a grit
mm-hmm,
tortilla, if you
mm-hmm,
will,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
to do that. I'm thinking through a cold fried chicken dish. And
Mm.
so taking fried chicken, if you triple fry anything, it will stay crispy even when it's cold. So how can we do
Mm.
that? One of the drinks we're looking at doing is like either a rum and coke or there's a great restaurant in Decatur, Georgia, that would do like a frozen, I think it was a Jack and Coke. And so it was like a Jack and Coke
Hmm.
slushy. But you
Wasn't
can
the
infuse
wasn't
what?
the flying biscuit, was it?
It wasn't Flying Biscuit. It's a sandwich shop. I can't remember the name right now.
Okay.
Makes me very sad. There's some great restaurants in Atlanta. We really loved eating there.
Yeah.
But you can infuse flavor like fats with alcohol and vice versa. So if we took
Ah,
butter and soaked the rum or the Jack Daniels in it and then made the Jack and Coke,
okay.
pulling the
Okay.
butter out. So the butter would go to the biscuit eventually, to with the fried chicken, cold fried chicken.
Mm, mm,
But then
mm.
we'd do a Jack and Coke or a rum and Coke with that butter infused. My name for it is the Paula Beam. So maybe Jim Beam is what we'll use, something like that. But
That's
that's where
great.
we get to have a lot of fun. I get to be very playful,
And creative.
and hopefully things work.
Yeah.
So far they have, and that's been really, really wonderful. So
Well, my wife has a mean grits and griots. You familiar
okay,
with grits and
what are
griots?
griots? I don't know griots.
It's basically strip steak and
Okay,
shrimp in the no, it's strip steak in the grits with a gravy on top.
okay,
And then
yeah,
she's got some great jambalaya and etouffee
oh
recipes
yeah, oh man.
if you're
I
interested.
mean, Louisiana, right? I mean, that's just
Yeah.
like food culture. It's a whole nother world down there.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being with us. Friends, if you want to learn more, go to thetabledenver.org and then hostcollective.org. Fantastic pictures there of his fine foods and some articles to take in. And Mark, I want to get you writing for us here at the Collaborative. Our blog
great.
is
That'd be great.
doing well and would love to have you work on that. Well, friends, thank you for joining us. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Helps us get the word out. Leave a review also wherever you get your podcast. At collaborativeorlando.com, like I said, you can sign up for our blog subscriptions, as well as get a 31-day faith and work prompt journal. I'll be glad to send you one for free. You can find us across the social media platforms. Don't forget Nuance, Formed for Faithfulness, our weekly 10-minute devotional for the working Christian that follows the liturgical calendar. I'd like to thank our sponsor for today, the Stein Foundation. I'm Case Thorpe, and God's blessings on you.